When the snake catcher took his foot off its head, it was turning around and trying to hit my shoe, which I've got a massive hole in. And I was really experiencing, as you would, death. And it stirred up in me something very, very, very deep, of this fear of death, and a real help rudder to sort of say, what are you doing on Earth? What are we all doing? You know, because this could be over for me like right now.
What's it doing? It's pushing us, it's squeezing us to find where the snakes are in our inner self, because that's the only place they ever are.
Hey. That's a beautiful mule that lives next door here. I think celebrating that we're starting the Just Because podcast, and this is the inaugural episode. So thank you, my friend. And we're going to get into, on this podcast, to show this channel, we're going to get into what is this life all about, the spiritual journey that all of us are on. And the world is giving us quite a laboratory right now to experience our spiritual awakening. And this happens not always through the good, fun stuff, but through the squeeze. And today's inaugural episode is going to be with my dearest friend and brother, Nathan King. I've been on this journey with him for 2 decades. The spiritual journey deeply has been a part of our unfolding and our friendship and our bond. So we're going to talk about lots of good stuff, facing death, the pressure, why is this all happening? Why is the world so chaotic? Why the seeming separation? What's it all for? And that's really what the podcast and show is about, is to find deeper meaning on this journey of life. So we're glad you're here. I think you'll enjoy and you'll get some good things out of our conversation today. And if you really want to get more of this and be part of it, hit that subscribe and like button. Helps us to do more of this, as we've really now decided it's time. There's no more waiting. We're jumping in head first. So thanks for being here again, and let's get into my conversation with Nathan King.
And he's truly my brother. Like, we're not like best friends, we're like brothers. It really is the only way to describe it, because we're so connected on our paths, and doesn't matter what we do, we always come back over many 2 decades we've known each other. I don't even know. It's something
Long time.
crazy.
It's a long time. We've been on this crazy journey for a while.
And, you know, we've spoken about so many things, and I was talking to some people recently, and I wanted to get straight to the point into this. We're in a crazy world right now, and we've got all sorts of things that are happening on a globalist scale. I don't
even, what does that mean? Like, tell the rest of us what that means.
What does that mean? It means we're not afraid to confront an issue with neighbors.
Well, I kind of saw you guys like kowtow to your politicians when they locked you all down like inmates.
This is like I think will go down in Australia's history as the most pussiest we've ever been. And so successfully,
you and New Zealand, you have these Maoris that are all talking big game with their, you know, their dance and everything, and then the, you know, Australia, the prison island, you know. I just thought you guys would be the last to freaking do that.
Oh, dude, I'm ashamed. My grandfather, who fought in World War II in Kokoda and some of the most rallied places in World War II campaign against the Japanese, would turn in his grave, no doubt, over what's happened to the male. So what I wanted to talk to you about is that, okay, there are a lot of people now who are awake to this so-called agenda, right? And I don't think you can really say, is it an agenda or is it not an agenda anymore? You know, there's just the freedom of speech, you know, like.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, just as we start off the conversation, that in this realm, right, it's real easy to get plugged in and start to get intense and blame and, all this stuff and get angry. And listen, we want to be, here's what I'm really passionate about is getting people to actually think for a change, really like do your research, think about it, don't just jump in and trust everything everybody's telling you. And I think that's what you're saying is like, we're getting to a point after a long, lockdowns and everything else because of that now as we move into this next stage, I think a lot of people are like questioning more. They're asking more questions and they're starting to actually think, which is a healthy thing.
Absolutely.
And I'll just say from like a very high spiritual perspective, so politicians, it seemed like they have a real bad vibe, or they're just, like you said, like Hitler-esque, right? Some relation to that. Well, there when we go through reincarnations, a lot of people reincarnate according to the mystics in their role of being a protagonist, of being the person who's going to inflame things, who's all about themselves or about, making things happen out of greed or power or control or whatever it is. And they have like their DNA is actually programmed for that as they come into this world. And they say as we go through great cycles, right, that the people who are in the original conflicts thousands of years ago come back, reincarnate, and they just keep doing their job over and over again. And I heard the other day, and the reason I'm bringing this up is that a great buddy of mine who lives in Israel says the rabbis and mystics are all saying that almost all of the bad guys are back, like in force. But he said the good news about that is that
all the good guys are back.
Yeah, all the good guys are back, and that's why they're all here. It's like everybody's, manning up, if you will, so we can get ready for this great revealing that's trying to happen right now.
Well, and this is where I wanted to talk about this, okay? Because, we've got people that were, maybe 2 years ago, really angry with the term of events that were happening, gone through a much deeper spiritual awakening, if you will, or, deep look in themselves. And they're sort of coming through and saying, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, these are aspects of myself.
Mm-hmm.
This darkness is actually my own darkness.
Yep.
And so there's this reconciliation happening with one seeing and accepting the darkness. And I wanted to bring this into a slight metaphor with animals that I've had recently on the farm. So I had a massive eastern brown, second most deadly snake in the world, where I had a snake catcher come, and he asked me to help him, and I had to step on this snake. This is a 2-meter big eastern brown snake. Cutting the long story short, when the snake catcher took his foot off its head, it was turning around and trying to hit my shoe, which I've got a massive hole in. And I was really experiencing, as you would, death. And it stirred up in me something very, very, very deep, of this fear of death, and a real rudder to sort of say, what are you doing on Earth? What are we all doing? Because this could be over for me like right now. Anyway, that snake was taken away. And yesterday, that was about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago or something. Then yesterday, I was with a brush cutter, a whippersnipper, trying to get pines, because we have an explosion of these young pine trees everywhere. And we want to plant native trees that attract koalas and stuff, which is really cool. So I'm trying to take out as many of these young pine trees as possible. And I'm busy away, and all of a sudden, bang, here is another eastern brown, half a meter from my feet. It's in a coil. It's had like a kilometer of hearing me come closer. It's had all the opportunity in the world to leave, and it doesn't.
Right.
One of the things I had when the other snake, the 2-meter big one, we got it taken away. In my deep reconciliation, my deep thinking, I was like, that's not accepting the whole. Like, this is a snake. It belongs here. It's its home. And I got it removed. I got it taken away. Now, some people would kill snakes. Here in Australia, it's like a $50,000 fine if you kill a snake.
Even a
So
poisonous one on your property?
absolutely. Well, we only have the world's we only have poisonous ones here, but it seems like
That's
seriously,
just well, that's interesting to me because like if you have livestock, you have other things, you have kids. I mean,
yeah,
you know, so
yeah. No, you get fined big dollars. So we have previously got them removed, and we thought that was the humane way. And so this next one, yeah, keeping in mind this is a younger one. Younger ones are not so trained, so they're very aggressive, and they also most of the eastern browns, the bigger snakes, will bite you once for a warning to say, listen, get the hell out of here, but it won't inject the poison because it takes 4 days apparently for the poison to reaccumulate, and that could really affect their eating. So
yeah, they're hunting and everything, right?
yeah, but the
Yeah.
young ones don't have the ability to decipher that just yet, nor do they have the ability to decipher how much poison they put in you. So if you get bitten by a young snake, you're most likely to die within a minute
Mhm.
of an eastern brown. And just, I think 2 weeks ago, there was a brown snake that bit a guy because he was trying to help his mate that had also been bitten, and he died within 30 minutes. This is not far from us. So snakes are like hardcore, right? And the snakes are great teachers. But I had this deep in my heart of, hang on, I have to accept the whole. The whole of me must wholly invest in the whole of all there is. And so I stood there and scared the living shit out of me. I was like, oh, and it's within striking distance, because when they're coiled up and they're staring at you like this, they can pounce their body length. And it's been in the sun. It was a hot day yesterday here in Australia. And I'm just like, oh, I'm well and truly in striking distance. I'm wearing shorts. Everything that you shouldn't be doing, I'm doing. And also, Spirit had told me about 10 minutes prior, there's going to be a snake. I ignored it the first time. The second time, I went, okay, stop. I activated my heart chakra and I sent a sonic boom to all living things, that I accept all living things and I love all things.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, bang, I'm in half a meter of a young eastern brown that are aggressive as hell. Like they're known for their aggressiveness, and it's sitting in the sun and it's coiled and ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it didn't move an inch. It could have easily gone, I've got a loud whippersnapper here, and
That's a weed eater. That's a weed eater for all you other, people that don't know.
Oh, right.
Whippersnipper.
Whippersnapper. Yeah. Where do these names come from?
I'll translate for you.
Whippersnapper. Anyway, brush cutter. It's another one. Anyway, so I pause and I'm in striking distance and it's just staring at me. I'm just staring at it. And I've got the brush cutter, admittedly ready just to go, "Rrr." But if I slightly move, bang, got me. I'm just too close, And that wasn't my intention anyway. My intention was I made a mistake by getting the last one removed. And so here's this darkness, here's this fear of death, this thing that we deeply fear, this whatever you want to call it. And in this moment, I just deeply accepted it as the whole. And when Spirit had told me, I opened my heart chakra, and the way I did it was with that retrospect of the whole. And I deeply looked at it and I was like, and I just backed off. And then it made me question, are we accepting the darkness because they're needed? They're part of the whole of this creation of duality. They've always been part of this duality. And, how does a man or a woman live in acceptance of this snake that must live on the land that could kill my kids or me? But yet I have to live in a deep, compassionate understanding with it. And just to top it off, because I'm going to hand it over to you to give what you think about this, I get home and I'm like, it's taken the wind out of my sails a bit. And there's a knock on the door. And you got to remember, we live on a farm. It's quite a long driveway. Like, no one just knocks on the door, you
Right.
know. And here's these two gentlemen who would be in their, I would say, 70s, in ties and shirts, hot day, at my door. And I'm like, hello? And hi, I'm a reverend from the local Jehovah's Witness Center.
Yeah. I knew they were
And I'm
Jehovah's
like, and they're
Either that
Jehovah's
or
Witnesses.
Mormons. Yeah.
And I'm just like, is this somehow linked? And the man, he felt energetically, because I'm, as you know, very sensitive to this, he felt complete. He felt like a man that had faced the darkness. Now, I might be making a whole lot of assumptions, but I sat in union with this man. Admittedly, then I made up that I was on a Zoom call to someone overseas and that I couldn't talk to him, because that was my immediate response of, what the, is a Jehovah's Witness just rocked up on my back doorstep. But hey, I want to hand it over to you. How do you reconcile living in the whole, accepting the whole, loving the whole, even though it's darkness, as we go through these times? What does that mean to you? And how does that relate to a normal person who is awake, who sees these?
Right. I mean, unless you stepped on it perfect, like, it's just, yeah, I get it. So anyway, what I think's interesting first is that you had that one incident and, dealt with it, took it away from the property. And now you have this other one that comes up, and it's kind of like, I think it's a good pattern recognition thing to check out, because it's the same in life, right? You have something that really bothers you, or something that you need to learn, whether it's in your relationships, in your finances, in your health, in whatever, and you get rid of the first relationship, let's say, right? And, oh, that one doesn't work for me, so I'm just going to get rid of it. You don't learn the lesson. So you go into the next relationship and you basically create the same exact scenario again with a different person. Or you go back to that person that you got rid of and revisit and have to go through the same lesson again till you learn it.
Yeah.
So, there is this, like, and snakes are interesting because, they represent mystically, like sort of our lower nature, our ego nature, our wanting to control things and everything else. Right. So it's like, in the Garden of Eden, before the snake tempted Eve with eating the forbidden fruit, right? That snake apparently had feathers and legs and it could walk around. And its punishment for being a deceiver was that it lost all its limbs and had to slither around on its belly for the rest of its creation. And so snakes represent this lower animal nature, right? So it's like, and what is the lower animal nature? It's separation. It's seeing evil. It's like, if you can be convinced that there is evil, right? That there is stuff that is truly evil, then you will always feel separate from the source. So what's maybe the lesson? Maybe one of the lessons, or maybe one of the things that you can glean from it is, you're at a place where you've been on such a journey, and I've been witness to this, but like, to let go of all the false constructs, all the Maya, which is illusion, all the false matrix, and to move into a place where everything has the spark of light in it. Everything is divine in nature, if we can make alignment with it. That doesn't mean all the behaviors and all the things we see and everything else in the world is all airy-fairy, cutesy, all good, and I don't see any bad. It means that you don't experience it as a bad thing.
I mean, I totally get the theory.
Yeah, I know.
And I totally understand the practical sides. But standing on a 2-meter eastern brown, and then now being within half a meter striking distance.
Yeah.
And standing there for over a minute, like correlating, you know, and feeling the essence of this thing that can go lightning speed and end your life. Like,
Yeah.
you know, that's like a pretty full-on meditation technique.
So what? No, but really, and like, what's the, you know, like what's the correlation in the journey? Like, it could be this, could be like, okay, man, the world's getting way more chaotic. There's going to be a lot more seeming death and dying. There's going to be a lot more chaos coming in the world. There's going to be a lot more, you know, wars and fighting and all, whatever it could be. Let's just say it could be. And I mean, do you feel like you can handle the intensity of the world differently than you could handle it 3 or 4 years ago?
Well, of course, but even like facing off with you know, an eastern brown, and I do. It's like I'm not facing off with a python.
Right. Right.
You know, like I could have easily had a python, or I could have had a redback spider, you know,
Right.
which is equally as lethal. But I could have had so many different versions of this.
Right.
You know, but as it turns out, you know, it's an eastern brown. So
Well, but like, think about that. Like, why would it be? Why would you create that?
because I'm completely fucked up and I love to suffer, and I always create extreme, as you know. And
Well,
so
maybe you're just like, I want to get this lesson big and be done with it, right? I don't want to mess around with like a silly little python that, you
I
know.
know the higher self would be
Right.
looking down at me in my little flight simulator here saying, fucking throw the snake into bed with him. I mean, bloody hell, get this lesson done, you know?
There's a
And
great thing you got to watch, and it's on it's got Cumberbatch, you know, the guy who plays Sherlock Holmes and Doctor Strange and all that. He's an amazing actor, and he just did this short video, and it's like 17 minutes long, and it's like a very actor kind of oriented thing with, it's got the guy who played Gandhi, Ben Kingsley, in it, and you know, all that. It's got great actors in it, but he is reading a book, and he has a clinch. They call it a clinch in India. Small little snake, really deadly, that he sees go under his sheet. And while he's reading a book in bed, and he's like, and so he's been laying in bed without moving for hours until his housemate comes home. And he's like, you know, he's like, I have to, I'm going to cough. I'm going to like, he's like, help, help. Because he can't yell, and they can't take the covers off because the light, and the snake will bite him. And it's like the fear that he is laying there in the bed with.
yeah,
And everybody that's trying to help him, and they, you know, I don't want to spoil it, but you got to watch it because it's so indicative of what you just went through. But he's hours there laying with a snake on him. So it's like, dude, I mean, you couldn't have a more awesome metaphor, honestly, you know, because what's the number one fear? What's the number one fear that keeps us separate from source?
death.
Death. That's it. It's like it's like we can rationalize, oh, when we die, we go back to one. We, you know, we hear about people have near death experiences and all these experiences, you know, but it's still like when it's in your face, all that theory goes out the window.
Well, it's like the first time I had to stand on the first one, and then the snake catcher actually did a beautiful ceremony where I actually had to feel its heart afterwards and hold it, funnily enough, you know, and get past my fear and to love it. It was a real beautiful ritual that most people, it'd be outside of their broadband of experience to decipher, and would just categorize it as bad, wrong, silly. Whereas I actually saw the genius part of this snake catcher, who was really a very skilled shaman, really. So I actually deeply thank him for the experience. But the second one here was, well, I didn't have a mobile phone with me. I've got 84 acres, so it's quite large. And I was up a northern part of our farm, There was no one around me. So if this thing bites me, I'm dead. So it took a whole new perspective on I'm right in that position of death. And the fact that I just stood there and didn't react, and it didn't react, it didn't move an inch. It just stayed so still. And in that stillness, I could transcend, if you like, death, past the fear, past the lower bodies, the animus and so forth. And like I said, I just had this whole, this is part of the whole. And some people would say that if you accept what is, then you've passed the test. Like the analogy you had before with the girlfriend or the wife or whatever, you know, if you learn the lesson together, even better. But if you haven't learned the lesson, you'll repeat it, right? So obviously I learned, let's say 95% of my first exam, but I needed this one.
Yeah.
I hope I've passed now, because literally I don't enjoy this examination, but I also know we've been through enough, and we're going deep here as we always do, because we don't have the caliber to act shallow, because these depths of what we're going to here stimulate all your behavior, all of them.
Yeah.
This one correlation between you and death, because it either creates a reality where you're always lacking something because you can't feel alive. So you're trying to fill the gap. And so you're constantly running around in relationships and then carrying on with certain innate behavioral techniques to get attention, etc. And so it's exhausting. So what we're talking about here is actually the root cause of humanity in itself, where it can either be really fearful of death because it doesn't understand it. So therefore it behaves in a way. Have I passed the test? Will humanity pass the test?
It's
on a
already
hologram here?
Yeah, but the thing is, it's already passed. You know, it's just, it's like, in a weird way, it's like playing out in front of us. The movie's running, but the movie's already in the can. It's already been made.
Yeah. Okay. So when do I have to stop seeing snakes?
Because I really believe, like, whatever the metaphor is, whatever the thing is, whether it's that, you know, whether it's an economic thing, whether it's a spiritual thing, like you just feel totally disconnected, or like, what's the world about? Whatever those things are that keep persisting, you're going to keep getting different ways to go through it until you're ready to sort of shed that skin. You know,
my question, from your understanding, is once you shed the skin, do you jump to another alternate reality where that doesn't have to play out anymore? Is that, I mean, that's probably like another whole discussion in itself, but what we're really talking about here is an advanced human evolution where we have a correlation between what we fear and facing it and evolving, and therefore it doesn't need to be. Like if you listen to Bashar, you know, Bashar, which is channeled by Daryl, he says on other advanced planets, they don't have any animals or creatures that could kill you because their psyche has already passed it.
Right. So
they don't have political systems.
Right. Because the collective consciousness is what feeds those things. That's why even in the Bible, it says, when we get to heaven on earth, there'll be no more stingers and biters.
Yeah.
Because the consciousness won't allow it. There'll be no more fires and hurricanes and all those things, because our construct, even though this is really hard for people to get their head around, because they think, oh, climate change and this and that. And, you know, like, but what if we are the projector of the movie collectively?
This is the real conversation that I wanted to have. And this, people who are on our podcast are growers. They're committed to personal development. They've gone through so many, you know, it's not just your belief systems. It's not some like NLP shit. You know, they've done a lot of study on quantum physics. They've seen how the observer can change and disturb the field. They've seen how entanglement works without time and space, you know. And, you know,
Yeah.
you and I have been running a group program for the past year. You know, in our last session, we did a quantum leap technology, and it put everyone in a flat spin. Like
Yeah.
everyone, because it took us into a time-space technology without our perspective.
Yep.
And that's a discussion for another day. And anyone listening, I don't know, go to euphorium.com or whatever. I don't care what you do. But this is a technology that exists. It's in our genes. And so what we're talking about here is in a practical sense. Like, we're not trying to talk kumbaya, blah, blah, blah. You've got families. We've got to provide for them. We're still here present, but we're also vastly outside of the time-space separation vibrations. And I think what we're doing is attracting these attachments to a certain set of reality that the egoic infrastructure has created. Yeah, it's the same thing as, it's like the same message, the same thing. It's like, really, when you see it from this perspective, you're like, it's just so organized and illustrated. So we see the snake. This is my point of view, right? We see the snake, and a lot more people are starting to see the snake, and they're going to see it in all the different various ways that they're meant to see it. So we now see it, and we now know that it's part of the whole. It's part of the gig. It's part of the duality. It's part of passing the test, so to speak. And so now the question is of syntax comes to my mind. Okay, let's say the top 10% start to see it, start to transcend the fear of it by looking deeply into it and starting to correlate above the law of separation and start vibrating in a higher altitude where they're not thrown off path by this fear anymore. So that top 10%, are they now in the eye of the storm where they're more or less untouchable because they've passed the test? And then does it correlate downwards? You know, like, how does consciousness, the equation, like, this is how my brain works, how does the equation of the flow down work to a certain point that it just goes boom? You know, like, I know that when I'm doing my quantum integration work, I'll take a fear of somebody, for example, and we'll put full awareness on it. But what's happening is, as we put it on that, it's spreading across the hologram of themselves. And once you get movement past it, it can flow on. And it's like a whole new quantum
well, I think
computer.
I think it even goes beyond that. It doesn't need to even flow. It's like, when you're affecting it, it actually is affecting not only what you might consider your consciousness, which is actually just a sliver of the one consciousness that is all connected. So you're actually healing it on many levels. And so when you start to talk about, like, the high mystics consciousness, right? Anything can be happening, but their reality is so different because they don't look through a lens of fear anymore. It's right. It's like they don't look through a lens of scarcity or death or anything else. They just see it as one thing. So
my question to you and is like, okay, so we've had a Gandhi do that, right?
Right.
So a Gandhi saw the United Kingdom or London, England, take over India. And I don't know all the ins and outs, right? But all I know is this one guy can see it and blends and teaches, I would say, a reachable and teachable audience who, in the culture of Indian, you know, you have so much mysticism built into that culture. And, you know, where this is part of their culture.
But this is actually a perfect example, though, because he started South Africa. He got thrown off a train as a lawyer, right? And he's like, because he was sitting in first class, he was wearing a suit and everything else, but he had colored skin. He got thrown off the train. He just said, this is not right. He started with a higher consciousness of this is not right. He did start to push back, for sure, right? Many of us are pushing back right now. But as his consciousness rose and he moved to India, back to his homeland, right? And he shedded his lawyer degree and everything else, and just wore his handmade cloth that he would make with his own spinning wheel, and wore it. He was not a diplomat, not a politician. He was a nobody. He was basically had no title. But when they finally got Britain to leave through nonviolence, see, so what is he taking? He's taking the principles of the highest principles of creation, and he's applying them. And he got Britain to leave India. They told him, when he told them in the beginning, that they would are you kidding me? We have the armies, there's no way we're leaving. You little man in a loincloth, what are you? And finally they left. But do you know what happened after that? The Hindus and the Muslims started fighting each other intensely and killing each other. So regardless of the backdrop of the spiritual country, there was fighting everywhere. And it broke Gandhi's heart. Like, we've gotten Britain to leave through nonviolence, and now they finally left, and you guys are squabbling over the crumbs of who's going to be in control. And you're killing each other. And that's when he went on his fast. And he says, I will not eat anything until every stick and every stone is put down. And if I die, then I will die. Not afraid of death at all, right? But maybe for some reason my life has enough meaning. Mahatma, father of India, right? That's what they called him, Mahatma Gandhi. And he said, maybe my life has enough meaning to get you to stop fighting each other, your own brothers and sisters you're killing. Now, it was really interesting, because every great, mystic goes through these trials. So Yeshua, Jesus, he was 40 days in the wilderness. What was he doing? Facing temptations of sexual temptation, power, of being able to do any kind of miracle, of controlling the world. He was facing every temptation you can imagine without eating. Moses, 40 days on the mountain, sorting out what was going to happen, right? The Israelites who got kicked out of or left Egypt, who were slaves and left Egypt 40 years in the desert. Gandhi, 40 days of fasting until he finally ate. And you know why he finally ate? A few days before he was done, there was a man that came on the roof, and and that's where Gandhi was. He was in a daybed on the roof, and he was in a city, and there was fighting in the streets, and he comes on the roof, and he's so beyond broken, this guy. And he has a loaf of bread and he throws it on Gandhi's bed. He says, you have to eat because I am going to hell, but you can't. You have to save us. You can't leave us. And Gandhi looked at him, very weak, almost 40 days into his fast, and says, why are you going to hell? Because in the fighting, my wife and son were killed by a Muslim. And I was so upset that I went and I killed a Muslim boy. And now I know I'm going to hell. I have nothing to live for. I'm going to hell. And Gandhi said, I know the way out of hell. And the man just was like, what? What do you mean? He says, I will give you the way out of hell. He says, you're going to go find a Muslim boy who's been orphaned in the fighting, who's lost his parents. The same age as the boy you killed and your son who was killed. You're going to take him and you're going to raise him as your own. And you're going to raise him as a Muslim, even though you are a Hindu. And that right there kind of sums it up. It's like what all this is doing, in my estimation, from a spiritual and mystical perspective, is it's giving us the backdrop to let go of judgment of fear, of anger, of aggression. And it's going to keep coming at us like the snake from every direction and trying to stir us up until we see the snake as a perfect child of God also. And during that transition, there may be people who can't play this game anymore. They might decide to do other things in their soul's evolution. They might transition, they might do things. But it's like, even the fear of death, like with Gandhi, he didn't fear death. He was like, if that's what's to be, that's what's to be. You know, I'm going to do the right thing, but you know, look at Yeshua, no fear. You know, everybody can, movies made of him like portray him as all this. There could be fear hanging on a cross and having done, of course, but he didn't feel fear because it says a guiltless heart, meaning a heart that feels like it is pure and has no sin. It can't feel any pain. And so we're all moving into that consciousness if we desire to, I believe. I believe that's the path. So you're going to get presented with the things that stir you up. And as the world looks chaotic, it's stirring up. I mean, brother, we just walked this path with a beautiful group of people for a year. And we saw every imaginable thing in them and in us. And we've been on this for over a decade together on this journey. And we have lots of people in our life who we commune with. Yeah. And we have lots of people in our life who, especially now, I don't know about you, but man, in my life, there are people just every day like, what is going on? They even will say, even in my bubble, I'm making good money. My marriage is good, everything, but I hate this world and I can't stand it. I feel like I'm lost every day, even though I've got a great job. I've got, all this stuff. Like, what's it doing? It's pushing us, it's squeezing us to find where the snakes are in our inner self, because that's the only place they ever are.